Hi, I'm Laura Cox Kaplan. You're listening to She Said, She Said. A.B. Stoddard is associate editor and columnist for Real Clear Politics. She's covered Capitol Hill for more than 2 decades and brings tremendous knowledge and expertise to the topic of women in politics and government. We're doing something a bit different today. We're actually recording a series of conversations about women in power, women as role models, and women as they're depicted in film. In this 3-part series, we'll be talking to Colleen Griffin, the producer of a political thriller called An Acceptable Loss, starring Jamie Lee Curtis and Tika Sumpter. We're also talking to former Congresswoman Barbara Comstock and A.B. Stoddard from Real Clear Politics. Each of these women brings tremendous knowledge, experience, and expertise to the topic of women in power. Women as role models, even when sometimes those role models may be morally or ethically challenged, and women in film in particular, and how all of these themes ultimately intersect. We're talking about women both in front of the camera as well as those who are behind the scenes raising the money to make interesting movies happen. A big thanks to the producers of An Acceptable Loss, Corrado Mooncoin, Colleen Griffin and Joe Chappelle, and Candy Strait, for their support of She Said, She Said, and for helping to make this series of conversations possible. A.B., welcome to She Said, She Said.
Thanks for having me, Laura. It's great to be with you.
I'm so happy to have you. You have been covering Capitol Hill for quite a few years now. You and I have known each other for more than 20. We'll leave it at that. What have you seen in terms of significant changes as it relates to more women in power? We've just had a big election. It's certainly not the first time that we've had an insurgence of a number of women coming in at the same time, but this one was fairly significant and also represented more racial diversity.
I'm really struck by the fact that women stood up and became more representative as office holders. I think they learned that we also make up a larger portion of the electorate, and they wanted their voices to be heard, and they wanted to be to represent their concerns, their policy preferences, all these things. What's unfortunate is that there are 89 Democrats in the House and 13 Republicans. And that number, 13 Republicans, is the same it was in 1989. So the Republicans actually lost members this time. And I think that there has been a tremendous response to efforts by Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, a Republican from New York, 21, I believe.
Yes.
But she started something called EPAC, and she is trying to sound the alarm in her party about bringing more women into representation in the Republican Party and into the House of Representatives. And I'm excited about the fact that there are some women running for 2020 already, so early in the cycle as Republicans, because this is something that all women should be trying to participate in, believe that they can bring value to, and I don't think it should be a Democratic Party value that the only women you see out there as leaders are Democrats. So I think that's been a personal sort of disappointment of mine. But as we look back at the leaders who have emerged since I first started covering Capitol Hill, it's an impressive lot. I mean, I look at it's been bipartisan, trailblazers like Condoleezza Rice, like Senator Elizabeth Dole, the Secretaries of State Madeleine Albright, of course, Condi Rice was one, Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi becoming Speaker for the second time. But I've trudged around with a lot of women since the early days, names people don't know, Congresswoman Connie Morella and Barbara Kennelly and Louise Slaughter and all these women that were in there, Barbara Mikulski, Senator from Maryland, our home state, a long, long time ago when it was sort of exotic, but they certainly didn't make the national news and not a lot of people knew who they were. And they did the hard work of laying the groundwork for this. And I think now women increasing in numbers has attracted a lot of attention, but the attention belies the fact that it's still incredibly challenging, and there are triple, double, quadruple standards that we can't really peel back, that are a part of the process, and that has to be accepted. I'm delighted to see it growing, and I think it just, like I said, it needs to be bipartisan.
Yeah. What about generational differences that you see in the way in which they conduct themselves, the way in which they lead? I mean, it's still early, and you've got a number of millennials who were just elected as part of this new class, and they are in and of themselves kind of unique. Again, maybe it's just because they as individuals are unique, or is it more of a generational shift where they are more inclined to share on a very personal level than what you or I may have seen historically?
Well, what's so interesting about that generational divide, of course, is something we all reflected on as women in Hillary's run in 2016, because so many of her supporters were, 60 and older. Some of them had either never been able to achieve professional success or had, against very steep odds like Hillary. Some of them had stayed with their husbands who had cheated on them. There were so many issues that were all around that kind of age and stage that millennial women didn't understand. They didn't remember the boom times of the 90s, the Clinton economy, the popularity of Bill Clinton, let alone the tawdry story of what happened in their marriage and what led to his impeachment, and even her entrance into politics. So they were sort of what older women took as an automatic, that all the girls and women would be with Hillary, was just stunning to women who were 25 who were saying, we are going to get a woman as president soon, just not this woman. I'm cool. Well, I'll wait another 6 or 8 years, thinking, of course, it'll be automatic. And so there's totally different attitudes about the chips in the glass ceiling and the perspective of women today who are 25 versus 55, 65. Their style and leadership, of course, is different. But I think that what's interesting is the ones who are younger coming up, who are in the poser generation, put everything on Facebook, market and promote yourself all day, make sure you always have an image of yourself out there, tell everything, hide nothing, versus obviously the difference of those who came before the digital natives, who don't think that you tell everything, that don't think that you put everything on Facebook from your morning coffee till you're soaking your toes before bed. And also at the same time, conversely, women do get to a point when they're almost 60 where they are liberated, and they're not trying to be someone they think they're supposed to be. They're not worried about a brand. They're not worried about an image. And they have tons of lifetime experience, which gives them perspective and confidence that I think is so helpful to leadership. So someone like Donna Shalala comes to mind. She's a freshman Democrat in the House. This woman has decades of experience as a university president at several universities. She's been a cabinet secretary. This woman has seen it all. She is one of the smartest, most funny, most shrewd, honest, blunt people I have ever met. She is an enormously impressive human being. You don't see her running around on TV trying to get the spotlight and grow her image as a freshman member of Congress. She's obviously working behind the scenes and bringing tremendous value to the conversation, to the policy debates, to the political machinations. Also probably is an enormous resource for the younger female members. And so as I get older, I value experience and what that brings to, the younger sisters. And they might be a different style, but I know that, Donna Shalala did come up in a very different time that these 30-year-olds can imagine. And I think of her as someone who just got there. I mean, she's not coming to them saying, hey, Katie Porter, I've been here for 30 years as a House member. I mean, she might be in her 70s, but she just got there too. And she's a member of their freshman class. And what an enormous treasure of knowledge and experience she can bring to them, and just sort of how to be a trailblazer. And so there are so many wonderful examples, I think, of how different they all are. But I certainly think the elder stateswomen are enormously valuable, even though they're not going to be like Facebooking all day about their latest speech or their next initiative.
Right. So They are all interesting examples of different types of role models, and it's a great opportunity to pivot and talk a bit more about the film. You've had a chance to watch the movie. It, of course, centers on two women who are at the highest levels of government, a vice president who becomes president and her national security advisor. As we've talked about in the previous two series, these two characters are flawed in different ways. When you think about this notion of role models, does it matter that much that they're not necessarily the good guys? One could quibble about whether they both fall into that category, but does it really matter, given that you're seeing women in positions that, at least in one case, we've not seen them in before?
I think as women, we learn from every woman in power, and whether they fail or succeed, whether they come up short in their character and their moral fortitude or not, it's still, we've just been watching men, largely white men, most of our growing up in these positions. And I think there's always something to learn from every story. And so, look at Susan Rice, look at Nikki Haley, Samantha Powers. What's so interesting actually is that Samantha Power was not celebrated by the media as this, force at the United Nations as an ambassador, the way that Nikki Haley was like the second coming. She got so much media attention, I think all deservedly so. But they're both moms, and they're both. But Susan Rice, because she was caught up in a scandal and has a very kind of defensive and sort of cool nature, became a quasi villain, and much like Hillary, and attracted a lot of negative attention. But I always think that women who are coming up in any industry, but particularly maybe in politics or government, should be watching every one of these stories, because there's always something to learn. What is interesting is there's double standard that women feel when they have incredible power, and especially in the national security space, that they feel they have to behave like men. Any kind of emotion or equivocation is seen as weakness, and this is a longstanding, doubt that even Democrats still have, that men, particularly, certain type of man in the Rust Belt, is not going to vote for a woman to be commander-in-chief. And so when you look at the character of Rachel, Jamie Lee Curtis plays, she's fearless, she's resolved, she's authoritative, she's driven, and that becomes unattractive and threatening to a lot of people who are uncomfortable with women in power. And so even though in the end she makes a morally a wrong calculation, she's putting, her ambition sort of overtakes her reasoning. Just those characteristics in any movie with a different plot line or in real life is unattractive. Whereas a woman is supposed to just be confident, hardworking, and capable, which Libby is. And then she has, of course, a moral crisis, and she's so conflicted. But she's been driven, and she, at some point, probably thought she was fearless. But if you look at the contrast between the two characters, she's supposed to be the real woman who wants to do the right thing because women do the right thing. And, of course, Rachel is so driven by ambition that it overtakes her, and she just wants to win at all costs, and beats up her female colleague and former friend because she's not willing to come along. That's what we're supposed to do. Why aren't you coming along? And so this is the crisis for women in leadership, whether it's at a Fortune 500 company or running for the Senate or governor. It's that once you get there, do you mimic the traits in men that you've seen in leadership and take the heat because of it, and often therefore hinder your ability to lead, particularly among other women? Or do you be completely honest and herald the fact that women are different leaders? And that's the crisis for women leaders. And I don't know, I hope we will see women in a different leadership style at all levels of corporate life, teachers, pastors, and public servants. But at the absolute level of commander-in-chief, I don't know that we're going to really see someone who's willing to step out and be different than a man. And so she is sort of the prototype of what we would imagine a woman under the pressures of making life and death national security decisions would be like.
So interesting. So, as you know, Colleen Griffin, who was the producer on this film, joined us in an earlier segment to talk about this, and it was really her idea to cast these two roles as women. They were originally written for men, not surprisingly. Do you think it would have mattered that much in terms of how the film would play out if those characters had been men?
Oh, it still would have been interesting, but we would have expected, right? There's the Dick Cheney character or the president, and then there's the conflicted guy, the national security advisor, who thinks that they've done the wrong thing and they've been dishonest, and I think it would have been different because it is the fact that the U.S. president is a woman and she's making these decisions without sweating it and is tougher than nails, and that she's making those demands of another woman is that they worked in concert. And then there was this, for Libby, this incredible crisis, moral conflict and regret. And I think that shapes the whole, to me, that is the whole storyline, is because it's two women in this incredible position of power and accountability. And it's so painful. I think it would have been it would have been just another story of the guy trying to do the right thing if they were men.
I can't think of another example of seeing president or vice president, and national security advisor cast as women or women.
No, I
cast in
can't
those
either.
roles.
No, it's usually one
Yeah.
surrounded by men. And that's such an interesting dynamic, is how women engage at high levels of power with each other versus with men. So you hear a lot about women being terrible bosses to other women because they take on the characteristics of what they believe leadership and management strengths are in men.
Maybe because of those role models, because of what we've historically seen in the past.
And we don't have enough yet of women. I'll tell a quick story I think is really interesting. I was invited to a candidate forum. I don't want to be too specific because it was an off the record with some Republican women who were running for the House and some incumbents before the election last fall. And I said, so do any of you, just when you're talking to voters, just because all these women are running, make the case that, you're a woman and that you need to go to the House because they need more women on the team? And they were stunned by the question and just really taken aback. And they said, I'm not running because I'm a woman. And, the typical speech, I'm running because I'm really interested in whatever, taxation. And I said, I just want to say the reason I brought this up is because I have a bias towards women in leadership. And I believe that women are better problem solvers. They're better listeners. They're better managers. They're better team members, team leaders. They read to the end of the email, which apparently men are incapable of doing. And I said, I was thinking that would be something that you were offering the voters in proud, just blunt fashion, that women, we need more women in government. And so it was sort of the surprising conversation that we had.
Was this a party-specific
Yes,
gathering?
It was. They were Republican.
Yes, of course they were.
And I was trying to urge them to say that this is an advantage you have over the male, your male opponent, and you should just wear it like a badge of honor. And we're not there yet. And I don't think Democrats do that either, really. I think that you're still afraid because then the Republican opponent is going to say that you're playing a woman card.
Right.
And this is my deep-seated belief that women are everything I just listed, better at those things. So I don't know that I'm not going to argue about waging war. I haven't been in a situation room. But just generally speaking, I would make the case, at least for governor's mansions and House and Senate.
Yeah. Don't you think, though, this notion, and I laughed, obviously, when you said that this was a gathering of Republican women, because I would have guessed that, because this notion of identity politics still looms so large for the Republican Party. And I think it's a real challenge in how candidates, male and female, talk about the issue of gender, because they want it not to matter, but it does matter.
It does matter. And look, the thing is, we can say the Republicans are uncomfortable with that topic, but look at the Democrats. They have a field with 5 women in it. None of them are doing well enough. Kamala Harris, Senators Warren and Harris sometimes make it into the top 4 or 5 in the polls. Largely the preferences so far of the primary electorate are white men because they want someone who can beat the president and they want a winner. These women are not taking off in their candidacies. And we have yet, in all the town halls and all the debates and the discussions, really focused on national security and the role of commander in chief, and what kind of bias exists in this country with men and their wives sometimes who don't believe a woman can sit in that room surrounded by men and make these life and death decisions. And I think that's a conversation we need to have, and it's clearly being avoided even by Democrats. They talk about domestic policy all day. Sometimes someone will bring up foreign policy, and the truth is a lot of them agree with President Trump. Get out of Syria now. Get out of Afghanistan yesterday. I mean, so that's a conversation they're avoiding. But the actual, conversation about why women could win next year is largely being avoided even by them.
You wrote a piece recently, which is really interesting, and I think a great additional point to make as we're talking about how women behave in leadership roles. Senator Amy Klobuchar was allegedly abusive to staff. I don't know. I never experienced it, so I'm not saying she was or wasn't. But
it's pretty documented.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. You wrote a piece, and several people had been quick to defend her, saying that the criticism of her behavior was in and of itself sexist. Talk a little bit about the piece that you wrote.
Right. So I have a real problem with this, which is, and I also wrote another piece, I think first, about Elizabeth Warren and the fact that she's just not likable. So What the liberal chorus does is they say, that's sexist. So you can't criticize anything about Tulsi Gabbard, Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, Kirsten Gillibrand, or Kamala Harris, because anything you say about them is sexist. So nothing will keep us further back and buried in this process of trying to achieve equal representation across all walks of life, professionally in this country, get more balance in our lives in terms of taking care of our children and our elderly parents, than talking about everything, every criticism that is leveled as a woman in public life as sexism. So Elizabeth Warren is not likable. That's just her problem. Neither was Richard Nixon. She can take it up with him if she thinks it was sexism. He had to face it. Every white man's been compared to the other white man, and John F. Kennedy was just a little more likable. So it's a tough game if you want to run for president. On the subject of Amy Klobuchar's record in the Senate, it's legendary. There's stuff that hasn't been published, but there's enough that has been published. And he dismisses it, saying she's a demanding boss. My argument is criticizing that is the furthest thing from sexist. She is not able to control herself when she's upset, and she treats her staff in an abusive fashion in some cases. Maybe in the best scenarios, and there are some anecdotes are worse than ever, disrespectfully. And my argument is that you don't go up against President Trump, who also shames his staff, fires them over tweet, makes up lies about them, everything else, and rages at them with a woman who's going to come in and have these same characteristics. That I think character matters in leadership, and I think that respecting everyone and working as a team is essential, especially when you can't run this country by yourself as president. You depend on all these people. And I think it's a sign of weakness in your leadership if a bunch of people are running to the press saying she has mistreated a significant number of people and we need it to be out in the open. And I say in the column, say it with me, ladies, if everything is sexist, nothing is sexist. So if we do get to this debate, Laura, about a commander-in-chief as a woman and how she just simply is too emotional to take on the role, and she's not physically and mentally capable in all this, that's going to be a discussion where if someone levels that charge, it's going to be sexist. And, or a charge about outfits or how someone came late and she didn't put her makeup on when she got to the debate stage or whatever, then we have to have a real conversation about sexism. And at that point, no one will be listening. If every single criticism of Tulsi Gabbard and all these senators have been dismissed as sexist, Hillary Clinton earned her criticism. She worked very hard at it. And criticizing the fact, that she has told a lot of lies, had her own private server, destroyed classified information, has a very entitled attitude. It's not sexist to say that's why she didn't appeal to many Americans as a candidate. So it's a very difficult conversation, but I'm very frustrated by the fact that liberals tend to believe that all women get a pass on everything because they're female.
How about pivoting just a bit and talk about how, especially in an especially polarized environment, it's very hard to get things done. And I think it's difficult for members, whether they're male or female, to show a track record in this environment. So talk a bit about how sort of you think about effectiveness, and if you're seeing any evolution in the way that your fellow journalists look at that notion, and does that have an impact, a benefit for women?
Well, that's a really interesting question, Laura, because from the time that you and I first got our experience on Capitol Hill and to now, the government has gone from, highly functioning to not functioning. So bills don't pass anymore. So in the constitutional confrontation that we're in right now, people are saying, well, the Democrats should get busy to work on health care and all the things they say are important. Well, they can pass bills all day long in the House, and Senator Mitch McConnell's not going to put them on the floor in the Senate. They're not going to be signed into law by President Trump. So they could do nothing but legislate all day, and the voters are not going to find their lives changed next year because they can't pass anything. So we have all this partisan gridlock. Yes, it is interesting when you look at sort of Nancy Pelosi. I completely underestimated her. I said there were more than 30 Nancy refusers on the record. She had a math problem, that she certainly was coming up against this pretty robust opposition in several members. I did not know that those members had no one to run against her. I figured they had a plan because they were so loud on their mission to knock her off. And I did not know that she had such secret powers behind closed doors to bend people to her will. And boy, does she. And I will give her that, because in the end, she got right to where she needed to be. And the praise for her in the last 4 months about how effective she's been is not because they've passed bills on the floor that have become law or have any chance of becoming law. It's because she hasn't taken President Trump's bait. She has sat in the meetings and been dignified. She has been stronger than him at most turns. She is shrewd as the day is long, and she has been not a liberal lunatic. She has talked time and time and time about governing for Main Street, hewing to the center, making sure that the folks at home know that they're not here to impeach the president. They're doing the best they can to fend off a constitutional confrontation, but that the members in Virginia 7 and Oklahoma 5 and New York 22 who won Trump's seats are here to do the people's business, and they're not here to focus on Donald Trump all day. They made her majority, and she knows that they will keep or lose her majority. And so she has been far more pragmatic and focused on the team and not going out. I think she learned a lot in her first experience as speaker. And so we use different metrics now. We're comparing her first speakership to now. We're comparing her relationship with someone like George W. Bush, who had great respect for her and gave her a monster hug at his dad's service at the Capitol, to, how she's being treated by President Trump, her age and stage in life, that she's in her 70s and she works 17 hours a day in high heels and is absolutely tireless. So we have it's not bills passed anymore. It's not laws on the books. It's look at this woman who returned against so many odds to leadership in this crazy age of Trump, and we watch with fascination what the challenges are facing her each week and how she handles them. So it is she is literally being judged on a different set of factors and questions and metrics than she was last time. I think it's fascinating. Mm-hmm. She's a survivor. We've seen her before. She's evolved. The party's going too radical. She went to AIPAC, a huge statement to say my party's not anti-Semitic, and to throw her own members under the bus. There's only 3 of them, but it was a very gutsy thing to do. And she is not a captive to the far left. And don't think she doesn't face an enormous amount of pressure every day to act like she is. And I just think that it's been a fascinating thing to watch. And she doesn't play the sexist card. She just goes about her business all day. So I think that's been interesting. The people who cover her and did in 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10 were really, those of us who've been around have really watched the evolution. And it's a fascinating lesson about politics, and it's a fascinating lesson about polarized government, and it's a fascinating lesson about women, and it's a fascinating lesson about Nancy Pelosi, who's a singular political figure. But I do think that in terms of what you're talking about, general sort of people being constructive members, I'd point out Martha McSally. When she was a member on the House side, she was a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus and always, always working with the other side, quietly behind closed doors while trying to make it through a Senate primary. That was very, very tough. When you're running against Sheriff Joe and Kelly Ward, I don't think it gets worse. And, now she's in the Senate trying to survive in a race that she might not survive in. And so the pressures on her have changed. Whereas I just personally know that she wasn't out on TV or in Vogue magazine in big splashy, articles taking a lot of credit for the fact that she is one of the women in the House who was with a great background and, serious national security chops and everything else, sitting at the table and staying there late into the night to try to come up with bipartisan proposals. So I wish women got credit for that, but when you don't take credit for it, nobody knows you're doing it. So here I am, giving her some cred. But
do you think it's because perhaps, and I'm not sure this is true necessarily in Senator McSally's case, but in certain districts and maybe even states,
it's politics. She has to survive a primary right now. She has to serve. Kelly Ward became the state party chair. Biden's ahead of Trump in Arizona. She's going to have a brutal reelect to hold McCain's seat. She just lost the Senate race, but she has to survive a primary with Kelly Ward as the party chair. Yeah. So that has to do. Primary politics shapes so much of what I'm watching every day and what actually ends up being our governance. It's a tragedy.
Can you talk about gender in that context a little bit more?
Well, I think women try to navigate brutal partisan tribal politics and bring more sensibility to it than men. They don't like to kill or be killed. They don't like to be street fighters. Mm-hmm. So I think it makes them uncomfortable. I'm trying to think about it's tough. Several women have done it. Kelly Ayotte comes to mind. Kathy McMorris Rogers. Places where they ended up. One lost, one won, but I need to come up with more examples. But basically, you can do it without coming out with a reputation like Liz Cheney, who just has a total brass knuckles, persona. That's what everyone thinks is like, get out of her way or you might not survive. She's very effective that way. But there are others who choose a different course, and it's hard. Barbara Comstock is someone, she's been able to navigate, in politics. Really being just known as like being more effective than sort of a political fighter.
In a very purple, if not blue, district.
That was brutal. That Virginia 10, just so you know, was the perfect storm of anti-Trump energy. Virginia 10 is high education, high income. So it's and Barbara, did an incredible job of hanging on, and she's. But she had to fend off primary challenges as well. It's very, very hard, and I think of Katie Arrington in South Carolina. She took on Mark Sanford in the primary to the delight of Donald Trump, and then she lost the seat in the general, and so now Oklahoma 5 is I'm sorry, in South Carolina 1. South Carolina 1. Is Democrat. So it's I don't know that we have a record yet for if you take if you like our Trump style primary fighter, Kelly Ward style, if you win, Kelly lost, Martha McSally won. I don't know that we if the jury's in, but women choose one of two ways.
Yeah. Do you think they're held, women who lose when they're running, are they held to a higher standard if they try to get back in again than men?
I don't know. I think it gives them more confidence. They know, they
them.
Right. But I don't know that. I don't know. I think it's hard to come back. But men do it all the time, and women do it all the time. Men have, obviously they've been at this game longer, and there's a good track record of them coming back and winning their seats back.
Karen Handel in Georgia will be an interesting one to watch.
Right. Exactly.
And others, I'm sure.
Interesting, too, because she's going to try to take the seat back from a woman.
So talking a bit more personally, the hyper-partisan environment that we operate in is also accompanied by really hyper-vicious criticism across many more platforms than we would have imagined when you were starting out in journalism. Are critics more vicious, or does it just feel that way because there are more opportunities? And how do you deal with that?
Right. I think that social media has just amplified so much negative speech, hate speech, criticism, tribalism, attacks, because it's so readily available. You can be anonymous in a lot of cases. I am not on Twitter. I'm on it anonymously, and I'm horrified how much time I spend on it every day because it's my news feed, but I'm not on Twitter, and I don't tweet. I'm not on Facebook, and I don't engage. I don't want to create a version of myself for the public. I don't think they care what I thought or what I ate for breakfast. I don't think they're interested. And I don't want to go back and forth. I'm really an anti-partisan, so both parties come at me. But I'm a big critic of the president, and there's a huge you get a lot of that. I mean, I get emails, comments on my columns, I get a lot. So it affirms every time I see it that it is a wise move for me to not be on Twitter. So I don't want to play that game. I'm not trying to win the argument. I make my case and go home, and people can go on chat rooms and scream at each other. And when I speak to groups, I try to, I'm so upset by how partisan everything and how tribal everything is. And when you're in the center, you can see it more clearly. You can see how counterproductive it is and how not rational it is. And so when I speak to groups, particularly young people, I always try to encourage them to do a few things. One of them is to vote in primaries. And the reason is, even if your seater's red or blue and it'll never change, you could send a more reasonable person there and not someone who's going there to vote no or yes all the time or whatever. Another is to try to download the Smart News app and just not cleanse yourself from your siloed media, but give yourself a check of how much you can keep taking in your siloed media, but it's a good check of like what you're being fed, and basically to never get your news from Facebook, and that it's a great place for your photos and your videos and your fun, but don't fight on Facebook about politics, and don't read the news on your wall on Facebook because it's chosen by an algorithm to affirm your bias and make us hate each other more. So those are my personal beefs about fighting on social media platforms, political war on the internet, and criticizing people so readily and so easily because it makes you feel good in the moment. It just doesn't get anyone anywhere, and unfortunately, it's so dangerous because I like to say, I mean, like the KKK meeting was far less effective when they had to gather in a parking lot than when they're on a site right now, thousands of them all going wild. That's just an example I just took out of nowhere, but that's it's really dangerous, and I think it's really dangerous for our children who are digital natives and don't know the world that we were raised in without this, so they can't see more as clearly as we can how poisonous it is.
Yeah. How do you keep from internalizing the feedback, the hypercriticism, it's not feedback. That's the wrong term.
It's never feedback.
No, it's not feedback. And it's hard because, you get feedback. Feedback, when it's constructive, can be really helpful.
Right.
It is worth listening to. But when it's just criticism or snarking or hateful comments, how do you keep from internalizing it?
Right. Well, because it comes from both sides, a little easier. But the criticism about the president is frustrating because my criticism is not of his particular policies or that he's a Republican. My criticism is the norm smashing and the erosion of the rule of law and the undermining of the judiciary and all that stuff that I think is incredibly dangerous. So that's like a whole thing about where are we as a country in our civics lessons and our people understanding how fragile our democracy is. And so that actually, instead of the criticism about my hairdos and, that I'm an old bag or whatever they want to say, that I can really it's like I'm pretty much rubber on that at this point, but I'm really concerned that people aren't concerned about where our system is headed. We are really blessed to be Americans, and it's a miraculous experiment, and it's so easily eroded and really destroyed this experiment. It takes a lot to keep it together. And so I get really down when I hear from people who think like government shutdowns are good, and that, decimating a community economically because it had like a government installation where all the income dollars was going. These things, that's I actually get bummed out about that kind of stuff, not the personal attacks. I get upset about where we're headed, because we are having a good economic arc right now, Laura, but we, as you know, as a country, just need so much help in terms of moving out of, with globalization and moving into a different time. We really need to help so many pockets of this country, and fighting about like political personalities is just what people seem to want to focus on. So that's the part of my job that I just get. That part, if you've covered Capitol Hill for this long and you've seen so much change and actually just really deteriorate, that's the part that lingers. Yeah. It's not the personal criticism.
We ask everybody who comes on the podcast for a single piece of advice, a life hack, a mantra. It might be something that you tell your kids. What would be yours? I
think if you always do the right thing, you won't regret it. Life gets tough, but you have to do the right thing, no matter the cost. I think that I would choose that one.
You're raising teenagers.
It's not nice to be mean. My kids are so nice. I think they turned out pretty well so far, because we had all these, mantra discussions a long time ago. But I just think that choose the right path and the right action. And it doesn't mean that it'll make you popular or make you a good salary or anything. But I think it's just hard to take shortcuts. It always comes back to you. So I think it would be do the right thing.
I love it. AB, thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura.
Really appreciate you being here. Remember, everyone, the film is called An Acceptable Loss. Our thanks to Corrado Mooncoin, Colleen Griffin, and Joe Chappelle, as well as Candy Strait. Rent or buy the movie An Acceptable Loss on Amazon, Hulu, YouTube, or any of the other streaming platforms. And we thank you all for listening.